Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining. Thank you for attending this session at Data Weekender. A little bit of introduction about myself. My name is Shabnam Watson. I'm a Microsoft Data Platform MVP. I'm also a speaker, blogger, and one of the organizers for SQL Saturday Atlanta. We actually have two versions of them. One is focused on BI and it's coming up in February. So if you're in the area or you're interested to be part of that event, we would love to have you. And then my areas of interest have been analysis services, Power BI, Synapse Analytics, and most recently, Microsoft Fabric, of course. If you're interested to connect with me, the best way is either LinkedIn or Twitter that I put the links here on the slide. I also put a link earlier in the chat that takes you to my blog where I posted all of the slides for today. We may have to skip over some of the slides, but they're there for you for a reference if you want to go into the details. Okay, so this session is intended for people who are new to Power BI and Power Apps, or at least one side of it. We don't get into the detail levels with either category. The intent is to give you an introduction of what it is, more geared towards the perhaps product managers, product owners, and Scrum Masters or other team leads that have a team of people. They want to know what these tools are about so that they can manage their resources better. And then perhaps if you're a developer who's just getting started with one of these to get you started. So that's the intention for this session. So I'm going to talk about the concepts of each one, and then I'm going to do a demo where we're going to take a SharePoint list and build a Power Apps application from it, and then also build a Power BI report off of the same SharePoint list. So to get started, Microsoft Power Platform is a low-code, no-code environment that it's web-based, and it lets you create applications with Power Apps. It lets you create analytical reports with Power BI, and then it has other tools such as Power Automate for automation and other pieces. So today we're going to talk about Power BI and Power Apps. I'll touch on Power Pages and Dataverse briefly, but then our focus will be on Power Apps and Power BI. So there are three types of Power Apps. When you say Power Apps, there's three types of Power Apps. The first one is the Canvas apps. These are screen-based. These are very similar to the applications that you have on your cell phones, where you click on an icon or an arrow and it takes you to the next screen. So you navigate between different screens. The other kind of Power Apps is model-driven apps. These are applications that are form-based. These are based off of Dataverse. So for a model-driven app, the only data source you can use is Dataverse. Whereas with Canvas apps, your data source can be an Excel file, it can be a SQL data source, a SharePoint list, or even Dataverse. With model-driven apps, you are tied to Dataverse. And it's meant to be for business applications. And Dataverse by itself is a fantastic data source for the Power Platform. It's built for Power Platform. It has security and many features and it natively integrates with your application. So it has its own benefits. I'll talk about it in just a second, a little bit more. And then the third kind of Power App that you can create is called Power Pages. And Power Pages, they were previously called Power Apps portals. These are web-based. So think of them as web-based applications or websites for either external or internal consumption. So they have each one of these application types have a different look and feel to them. And then depending on your use case, one may be the right choice for you. Now, Dataverse itself, as I mentioned, is the built-in software as a service data source for Power Platform. If you want to compare Dataverse to other databases, you can think of it as Azure SQL DB plus Cosmos DB plus file storage. So it's not just an Azure SQL DB, it's more than Azure SQL DB. As I mentioned, it comes integrated. So if you're creating an application and this is the first time when you're going to store business data and you really don't have an outside enterprise scale data store, such as a SQL Server or another data store, then Dataverse can be the right choice for you. And Dataverse has no storage limits. There are ways where you can scale it and grow it as your business grows. So you have to make a decision whether you're going to make Dataverse or use Dataverse or an outside data source. It all depends on your use case. Again, if you're coming from, this is a quick application you want to build and you're starting with a SharePoint list or Excel, those data sources work well. But if you want to then scale up your application usage and you want to go to the enterprise level, that's when you want to think about using one of those enterprise grade sources, one of which is Dataverse for you. All right, so let's dig into Canvas apps more, because that's the one that I'm going to show you today. So Canvas apps, as I mentioned, they are screen-based. As long as you have a type of Office 365 or Dynamics 365, then you can create Canvas apps based off of a SharePoint list or an Excel file, many connections. You can build them for free. Free meaning that you still have to have that Office license. And as long as your data source is used for collaboration, like a SharePoint list, there's no extra charge for you to use those data sources. But if you want to build a Canvas app that goes beyond the basic data sources, like if you want to use the premium, they're called premium data sources, a SQL data source, then that's when you need to have a license. Now, the licenses have a lot of levels and details, so I encourage you to actually check the official Microsoft licensing guidance on that. And these, the prices and options change a little bit. But one thing that has been consistent so far and is different than Power BI licensing is that if you use a premium connector, let's say you build an application off of SQL Server, your developer needs to have a premium license, and then all of your consumers of the app also need to have a premium license. So it's different than Power BI, where Power BI licenses are capacity-based. So if you buy a capacity, the premium capacity, then your users don't need to have a paid license. Here it's different. So as soon as you're into the premium connectors, your developer and your consumer both need to have those licenses. Now, outside of licensing, once you build your app, it will be immediately multi-platform, meaning that it will work on a tablet, it will work on a cell phone, on your laptop, all of it, without doing actually a lot of work. It's fairly easy to do that. So on your phone, you can get the PowerApps application on your phone, and then you log into your account and it will show you all the applications that you have built with PowerApps. And actually, if you don't even have an application and you just want to know what these look like, if you install the PowerApps application from the store on your phone, then you log into your Office 365 account, then it has a bunch of template apps, sample apps, like you see here on the screen on the right. This is a sample app on my phone that you can play with to get a feel for what's possible to build. All right, and then same thing on your computer. You can install the PowerApps Windows application that will bring up all the application that you have access to. But again, on the laptop, probably most people are going to use the browser experience instead of an application to open the apps. Now, how do you make a PowerApps application? You go to PowerApps Studio. I have the link down here. It's make.powerapps.com. And once you're in the PowerApps Studio, then you can start building applications either from scratch, or these days you can get help from AI. So this top section that you see I've highlighted, this is the Copilot. So it helps you build an application or build the foundations of it for you. So if you say, I want to create an inventory management application. You just click on this list inventory, and then you will continue and it will go to work and create an application for you. Just know that if you follow Copilot, in most cases, Copilot will land you into Dataverse. So it will create a table for you, a sample inventory table in this case, and it will put it in Dataverse and will build your application off of Dataverse. So there is a heavy direction towards Dataverse if you're using Copilot. And then once you're inside the Power Apps Studio, so this is where it looks like once you open that sample inventory application. You see on the left here, as I mentioned, this is a Dataverse connection. So you see that it landed you into Dataverse. And then it gets you started pretty much with an application that's ready to go. From here, it's just a matter of doing the formatting, adding some fields. It's very easy. It's almost like you're working in PowerPoint. It doesn't take a lot to get started from here. Now, going back to the main page, okay, so the top section takes you to Dataverse. If you start from this bottom part where it says start with data, this is a little bit different. So this is when you are giving it an actual data set to start with instead of a sample table that it created for us in the previous section. Okay, so if you go from this choice, you have you have two choices after that. The top section, the top rectangle, if you choose any of these where it says upload an Excel file, start a blank table, or select an existing table, all of these also land in Dataverse. Versus if you choose the bottom section where it says select external data, this doesn't actually move your data. So if you start from an Excel file or a SharePoint list, your data stays where it is. Again, there is no right or wrong answer here. It all depends on your intentions, whether you want to move your data from, let's say, an Excel file or SharePoint list to Dataverse, or if you want to keep it where it is. It depends totally on your requirements. I'm just pointing out that from the interface, one location will land you into Dataverse, the other one does not. Now, if you want to make sure that you do not end up in Dataverse, one of the easier ways that I found out is that if you, instead of the home page, home tab, if you go into the create tab, then you see that it says create your app, start from. All of these options, either one that you choose, SharePoint, Excel, or SQL, will land you in a Power Apps Canvas application that does not move your data. So this is a sure way to get a quick application built, keeping your data where it is. And the experience is very similar. No matter which one you pick, you will end up with an application that I have a screenshot of it here that has 3 screens. So it will create a 3-screen application for you. It will pick some random fields from your table that you give it, and then you can modify it, of course. And the 3 screens are a browse screen, a detail screen, and an edit screen. And you can navigate between. So the first one lists all of your items. And then there is arrows where you can go to the next screen where you can see the details, you can edit, and you can save. And all of this is built for you. So, and these are screenshots of what the other screens look like. So this would be the detail screen. And if you click on this pencil here, it will take you into another screen where the fields are editable. And you update these, you click on this check mark, it will save your data back. So all of this application is created for you by you just giving it a table. It knows already how to write those update statements back to your SQL data source or to the SharePoint or to Excel and keep them updated. And this is a great starting point. So it gives you a boost. Even if you're an experienced developer, this gives you a huge productivity boost. If you're a new developer, these sample applications help you learn, because if you go with the built-in wizard, then it will create these applications for you, and then you can look at each button and see what function it uses, and you can learn those functions one at a time. So the language that Power Apps uses to do its functions or communicate with the backend data sources called PowerFX. So it's something like Excel formulas. It's relatively easy to learn. And the best way to learn this for me has been to start with the sample applications and go from there. So these are some of the functions that are the starting functions. So submit form takes a form, that's a component on the screen, and will write it back to the data source. That's all you got to do. It knows how to do all of the code behind the scenes. Reset form just wipes out the form. So let's say a user has populated a form and then they want to cancel. Reset form will reset it back. And then navigates between your screens. So when someone clicks on the right arrow, you want to go to the next screen, that's what it does. And back takes you back to the previous screen. Okay. Now, once you build an application, before you can share it with others, so of course you have to save it. Once you save it one time, then it will auto save every 2 minutes by default. Once you save your application, you always have access to it, but others in your organization will not have access to it until you publish and share it. So you will publish it, and then you will share it with others that you want to give them permissions to. So it's a two-step process. The nice thing about PowerApps is that it keeps versions of your application. So in case you need to revert back, you can do that by going to a previous version and say, restore to this version or publish this version. So this will help you have some application lifecycle management in case you need it. All right, so I'm going to switch to demo and show you how to create a PowerApps from a SharePoint list. All right, so let me bring up my SharePoint list and we'll start from there. So here's a SharePoint list that I've created. By the way, if you haven't seen this, if you go to Microsoft List, the SharePoint list actually now show up under the list application by itself. So List now has its own standalone application that will show you all of your SharePoint lists in one place. So this is how I got to this list, and you can see that I have a simple list of items to shop or items that I have purchased in the past. And from this list, a couple of things. So one thing I can do from here is I can say integrate and say Power Apps, and will create an app for me. However, I want to have more control over this. So instead of going from here, I want to go from the Power Apps Studio. The other thing I want to mention is that also notice if you go to integrate, there's a Power BI version, and you can say visualize the list. This will create a Power BI report for you very quickly, and it's web-based. The one downside of this is that this will land the Power BI report in a mystery workspace. So if you go to Power BI and if you look at your workspaces, you actually don't see where this workspace is. It's hidden, it's managed by Microsoft List. And if in future someone removes the list, the workspace also disappears. So again, to have more control, I recommend that you build your Power BI report from Power BI desktop directly. This is just good for a quick visualization from here. All right, so let's go to Power Apps. So I'm in make.powerapps.com, as you see up here. And all right, here we go. And this is the home page that I was showing you. So if I type something here, this is Copilot is going to build an application for me, and most likely I will land into Dataverse. Same thing with here. So instead, I'm going to go to Create and choose SharePoint. Again, the process is very similar if you go to an Excel file or if you go to a SQL database. With a SQL database, the requirement for the wizard to pick it up really quickly is to have a key column. And with the Excel, the requirement is that you have marked an area in your Excel file as a table so that it can pick it up. With the SharePoint list, it's a lot easier. So you just pick your list. I'm going to choose my list from here, personal expense tracker, and I'm going to say connect. As soon as I do this, PowerApps goes to work and it creates an application for me that has 3 screens. Okay, so all I did was click on it, right? And without even making any changes, I'm just going to go and run this application from here so that you can see that this is already fully functional, even though it picks some random fields. So I'm going to click on preview, and you can see that if I click on this arrow, this is going to take me to the next screen. If I click on edit this item, I can change this to a different value. I can save, and this is saved. So right now this has been saved to my SharePoint list already. And I can preview the application on different platforms to see how it looks like on different platforms. Okay, so let's talk about the PowerApps Studio real quick. So here on the left, so I'm on a tree view, which shows me a breakdown of different screens that I have in my app. So we have 3 screens here. If I want to add additional screens, I can go here into the insert and look for, actually, this is where we put components here, new screen. So I can go onto new screen and I can add additional screens. On each screen, if you want to add extra items, all you gotta do is to go insert, you pick your item, it shows up here. So the first screen is called a browse screen. Of course, best practices, if this is an application that you're going to keep, then to rename these screens to things that make sense for you instead of these generic names. So on the browse screen, the main component here is a gallery. A gallery will show you 1 item per row in your SharePoint list or table or Excel file. The way the gallery works is that it has cards on it. And if you format the first card, everything else will follow. So if I choose the first card and I put the picture here, everything else will follow. And if I format something from here, it does the same thing. So now let's say I want to add another field. It randomly picked 3. Now I want to add the description. So all I gotta do is to take one of these fields, copy and paste it, and then I come up here and change its text to this item, and this will bring up IntelliSense where it shows me a list of all the fields. I'm going to put description, hit enter. So now I have a description here. And as far as the properties here, so you can always change them from here. So you can say text equals, there's a whole set of properties you can get to from here, or you can also change them from here on the right. So usually you have more than one place where you can change the formatting. So on the first card, if I change the color, you'll see that everything else will change colors as well. All right, so this is the gallery, right? Now, how does the gallery get its items? It is connected to our data source. If we go to here to data, you'll see that this is our SharePoint list, right? And it's called personal expense tracker. If you look in the gallery, the items property of the gallery is what's holding that list. And you see this is all it is. This @personal expense tracker is all it needs. Everything else that you see around it is what PowerApps created for us. You don't need all of that. if it's a good way to learn the formulas, what it's doing is that it searches, it uses this text field if you're searching for something, and then it will also use a flag to sort ascending and descending based off of this icon up here. So what it's doing is that it filters it. So it filters the list based off of the value of the text box, and then it uses a function around it to sort by depending on the value of that flag. And by the way, the variables here are different from other programming languages, so you don't have to define this variable before you get to use it. You can just start using it, and it works. So it's fairly simple. All right, so the gallery is populated, right? Now, what happens if someone clicks on this icon? So what it's doing is, if you notice, it says select parent, on select, select parent. Okay, so I'm going to go to the parent and bring up the property of on select. So it says, okay, so if this card, the gallery is selected, navigate to the detail screen, and none means the way that the screens fade. It's almost like PowerPoint animations where you say fade out, slide left, slide right. That's what it is. So from here, if you click, we go to detail screen 1. On detailed screen 1, the main component here is a form. So you see, this is a form. And there are two types of forms in PowerApps. One form is a display form, and the other one is an edit form. The form on this page is a display form because it just wants to show you the values until you click on the edit button. The form has two important properties. One is the data source. So what is it connected to? So if you click on this delete icon, it needs to know what the data source is. So what data source is it working with? And the other important property is items. So where does it get its items from? Because you don't want to ask the users to enter everything from here. You want to pull it from the gallery. So it pulls everything from whatever was selected in the gallery that you arrived here from. And then data source. So item and data source are the key two elements. All right, so what happens now if you click on this edit icon? It creates an edit form, which is on our next screen, and it will navigate to it. So now let's go to the next screen. All right, on this screen, we also have a form. It's an edit form, and this one, you can see that you can actually type in the boxes when it comes up. Okay, so it's an edit form, and again, it has a data source set so that it knows where to write the data to, and it has its item property says, which is whatever we selected. And that's all it takes. So those are all the formulas that are in this application. If you click on the X, you see it's resetting it, going back. If you're on the detail screen, you push on the back button, it navigates back. And this is all it takes for you to create an application. So if you ever created these applications from scratch, from one of the older programming languages, you know that there was a lot of work that you had to do to connect, right? For example, ADO.NET to connect to a SQL Server table and create all of these. This has taken all of that away so that you can focus on the experience for the application. All right, and then once this application is created, of course, you will save it. So app DW, and once it saves, then you would click on this button here to publish it. So now the application is published. And the nice thing about this is that if right now this application that's published, if I go to my phone and open up the applications, what I can do is that I can let me refresh my phone real quick so I can get the application. What's nice about this is that this picture, the image that you see here, this one, if you are running this on a tablet or on a phone that has a camera attached, when you click on this, it will take you to the camera. It will activate the camera. Whereas if you are opening this here on a laptop, which I am, it will take you to your file. So that's what's nice about it. So I'm going to open up the application on my phone and actually let me go back to the list where we are in the list, and I'm going to find the pencils, and I'm going to change the picture for the pencil to something else, and hopefully this will work. Let me take a picture and use the photo, and I'm going to click on that save the check mark button. And here, hopefully if I hit F5, we're going to see a different picture for the pencil. And there we go. So this is the application. All right. So we have a very simple Power Apps right now. Now, what I want to do is I want to go to Power BI and create a report from it, because this is great for capturing data, right? So I'm capturing data, but this doesn't give me necessarily the big picture of where I'm spending money, how many items I'm purchasing per month, what's the average price, and those kind of questions, those kind of analytical questions. For those, we can go to Power BI. So I'm going to create a Power BI report for that. So let me open up Power BI Desktop. So for Power BI, if you are new to Power BI, you use Power BI Desktop to create your reports, your data sets, your visualizations, and when you're done, when it's time to share, you would publish them to Power BI service. You can, of course, you can share the Power BI file with someone else in your organization. You can put it on a shared network drive. You can email it to somebody, but those are not meant to be for broad sharing experiences across an organization. So if you're just testing and getting started, that's perfectly fine. If you're growing, if this is something your company is adopting, you want to look into Power BI service. So this is Power BI Desktop, and I'm going to go and say get data, go to more so that I can type SharePoint, and I'm going to choose SharePoint online list, connect, and I'm going to grab the link for my SharePoint list. Put the link here. And this is the expense tracker. I'm going to click on transform data so that I can take some extra stuff out. So it's always best practice to only bring in what you need. And also best practice to reduce the cardinality. So if you had data that is down to like seconds, for example, for date, time, and if you don't really need the time part of it, it's best practice to get rid of the time part. But this is a very small data set, so it doesn't really matter for something that's this small. The only thing I'm going to do is that I'm going to go to choose columns and remove the columns that I don't want to keep. So a lot of the columns here are default columns that came over from the SharePoint list. So these are the item, date, amount, category. These are the columns that I had manually created in the SharePoint list. Everything from created by and onward are the columns that SharePoint creates for a list. And for the Power BI reporting part, most likely you don't need those. So let's go ahead and click OK. And now I have, you see, I have a limited number of columns here. Again, if this is a real report, you have a lot more rows. You can further enhance the data from here, do data transformations by using Power Query. But for now, this is sufficient. So I'm just going to click on close and apply. and this will take me back to the visualization part. So give it a second. So what this is doing is that it moved the data, by the way, from the SharePoint list into Power BI. We imported the data. Okay. Now here I have the list of my columns, and it identifies the numeric values, and it puts a sigma next to them. What it does also is that if you have, there's a functionality in Power BI Desktop that it will automatically create a hierarchy for any date column that you have. Now, keep in mind that this is typically bad practice. So if you're working with large amounts of data, this is a bad practice because you don't want it to create a date dimension for you for every column that you have. You want to have a central date dimension that you reuse, so you can turn that off. But for the purpose of this quick demo, this actually works well for me. So I'm going to keep this here. This ID column, I'm going to hide. We don't need that one. And now let's put this amount in there. Now, this is called an implicit measure. It's because Power BI Desktop created for me without me doing anything about it, right? So I drag and drop it here, and then I can do a breakdown by item. So I drag and drop item here, and now I have the breakdown, right? Now, this is giving me the sum of amounts. You see that? So by default, it did a sum of amount. What if I want to see the average amount? So let me copy and paste. That was a Control-C, Control-V. So what I can do here is I can go here and change this to average. And this time it's averaging the value. Of course, we're like, I'm in the, actually, I should have done, instead of that, I should have done the category so that the averages are different. I actually put the item. There we go. So instead of so this is an explicit it's an implicit measure. So every time I drag and drop it into a chart, I have to make a decision of what makes sense. Does it make sense to average amounts or take a min max or summarize, right? So instead of doing that, the better way to do this is to create an explicit measure. Then with an explicit measure, you as the author have control over how you want it to be calculated, regardless of who drags and drops it on any visualization. So in most cases, it is beneficial and best practice to actually create the explicit measures and hide your implicit measure. So you can tell here that this is an explicit measure by the icon next to it. So this is, again, key. Even if you're just starting, pay attention to this. And if I bring this down here and I take the amount off and I select this one, you see this one already has the calculation built into it. I didn't have to change it. So this is important if you're creating a data set where you publish the service and then you're going to have other coworkers who are going to create visualizations off of your data set. You will be defining the model. So you're the modeler here. So real quick, since this is an intro to Power BI, if you go to I'm on the report view, if I go into the model view, you can see that I have one table here. Now, if I had more tables, if I had, for example, a date dimension, this is where I would define relationships between my tables so that Power BI knows how to build the queries for me for the visualizations from that point on. So at the time when you're building the visualizations, your report builder doesn't necessarily need to be aware of those relationships. Here we are both the person who's creating the semantic model and the person who's doing the visualization. So it doesn't make that much sense. But if you're working on a real project, typically you will have one person create the data set, define all the calculations, and then everybody else will reuse. All right, so let me just put a couple of at least one more item here. And then now that we have the report, I want to share this with other people in my organization. I am going to save this and publish it to Power BI service. So here, when I go to publish, I get a list of the workspaces that I have access to. So workspaces are logical locations in Power BI service for collaboration. This is where you can only publish to if someone has given you permission to publish that workspace. And here I am the owner, so I have access to this workspace by default. In order, by the way, for you to be able to publish the Power BI service, you need to have a pro license, a pro Power BI license, or a premium per user Power BI license. If you're so that's important to remember. Okay, so I'm going to say now open in Power BI, and this will take me to Power BI. By the way, that's Microsoft Fabric's icon is showing up there for a second. And this, here we are in Power BI. And if I go to workspaces, so you see on the left, I have a list of workspaces. Each workspace has its own data, has its own reports in it. If I go to Data Weekender, you can see that this is the one that we just published, DW. Now notice that on my desktop, I only had one file, right? But when I published it, it created two items for me, a report and a data set. What it does is that it creates the report that points to the data set object. So going forward, if this is a real scenario, best practice is that next time when you want to create another report that doesn't necessarily be needs to be right next to this one, instead of getting your data from the SharePoint list, you will say get data from Power BI data sets, and you will build your future reports off of this data set here. And then once your reports are in a workspace, then you can give others access. Of course, if you go to manage access, this will take you to an interface where you can give others direct access to your workspace. So you can add people as other admins, or you can add people as a member or a contributor. Those are people that you want to collaborate with. Those are your teammates working directly with you. But if you're sharing this with users or consumers, then you can either share a report. You want to share a report only, not the workspace, so that if they come into workspaces, you don't want them to see the workspace. That's the difference. You want them to be able to just see the report. If you want to do that, you click on share, and this sharing experience is consistent with everywhere else almost in Microsoft Office these days. And you can share the link with them so that they can see the report, and then it will show up for them under the data hub. The other way for Power BI content to share is to create an app. Now, this is not a PowerApps app. The word app is used in all places. This app creates a collection of reports that you can basically share at the same time. So let's say you have 10 different reports and you want to bundle them up all in one place. This is what you can do. So for example, I have two reports here, and this will create my app. And this is another way to share content. So this is an app. You see, it has a different feel for it, and you can go to different tabs. Okay, so this is the sharing part for Power BI. From here, what you can do, you can take this to, you can open this in Teams, you can export it to Excel, you can subscribe to the report so that every morning you get a copy of the report, and depending on your license type, you can either get a full copy of the report attached in your email, or it will send you a link to the report where you can go and open up the report. We have a few moments left. So what I want to do now is I want to show you real quick a little bit about Microsoft Fabric. So we talked about Power BI being part of Power Platform. Power BI is also part of Microsoft Fabric. And it is true. So it is part of the Power Platform because it's one of the collaboration tools. But from a implementation and background and data perspective, it's part of Microsoft Fabric. And just like you can take Microsoft Word out of Office, you can take Power BI out of Microsoft Fabric. So Microsoft Fabric is currently in public preview. It's not general availability. Once it becomes generally available, everybody who has a Power BI premium capacity, their capacities will become Fabric enabled. Right now, you can attach to a trial capacity for Fabric if you want to play with it, which is what I have here. In future, if you have a premium capacity, it will become a Fabric capacity. And if you don't have a Power BI capacity, there are going to be options for purchasing Fabric capacities that start at a much lower price point than currently Power BI capacities, premium capacities start at. So anyways, this is the Microsoft Fabric landing page. And from here, what I can do is I can go to Power BI. Notice I have the Power BI icon here on the left. So what this does is it only changes what items I can create. It doesn't really change the workspaces. So it just shows me all that changes is this. It says new data flow gen 2 or pipeline. If I go to data engineering, which is part of the Synapse experience, now I can create a lakehouse, right? If I go to data science, now I can create an ML model. But these are just, again, a logical grouping of things you can create, items that you can create. Everything that you create will go into a workspace. So if I go back to the Data Weekender workspace, right? So you can see that I have my Power BI report and data set, but now what I can do is I can also add in a lake house or data flow gen 2, a warehouse, and all the other good items that are coming soon. So that's why I wanted to show you. And then in future, when you're creating Power Apps, you're going to have other data sources to build off of. All right, so I'm going to go back to the slides and talk about the licenses for a couple of minutes. All right, do you guys still see my screen?
Yep, it's safe.
Okay. All right, perfect, thank you. All right, so Power Apps licenses. So if you're getting started with Power Apps and you would like to, you're just getting started, right? Again, if you have Office 365 or Dynamic 365, there are plenty of free and standard connectors that you can use. So SharePoint List, OneDrive, all of those are free. Once you get to the premium connectors, that's when you need to have a license. The best way to figure out if your Office 365 or Dynamics 365 covers you, if you go to this licensing guide that I have here, it has a breakdown of exactly where you land. Now, if you're just getting started, you want to try it, you don't want to purchase a license, even, you determine that you need a premium license, but you're not ready to make a purchase, you can do a trial plan that goes for about 30 days. This is just for you trying things out, this is available. There's also a developer plan available that you can use. This one doesn't expire. It gives you access to all the premium connectors. It has some throttling built in so that you won't be able to use this for production. So when you get this, you get to agree to the terms where it says you're not going to actually use this for production. One of the ways that they prevent you from using this for a production is that they will throttle the speed of the, for example, or the number of Power Automate flows that can run and things like that. That's how they control this. And then if you're ready to purchase licenses, remember that both for PowerApps, both the consumers and the developer need to have a license if you're working with those premium connectors. There are two licensing models. One is called per user, which is the one on the left, per premium, PowerApps Premium or per user. It means that you pay $20 per month, but that user or developer can work on unlimited apps. Whereas there is a $5 per month, which is for one user for one app. So you have to do the math and see how many applications you have in your organization, how many apps you want a person to open, then you can decide on which model is the best for you. Now, there is another option available. If a fixed license price does not work, there's a pay-as-you-go license where you will pay $10 per unique user that opens an app per month. And this one charges to an Azure subscription. So every month it counts a number of unique users and it only charges you for those. This is good for cases where you have different traffic. So if you have a seasonal business where around the Christmas holidays or another holiday, you pick up a lot of users, but other times they're really not using the application, this may work better. Also, if you're just getting started and you don't really know your usage pattern, this may be beneficial versus paying the same amount every month throughout the year. Now, if you go, how do you buy these licenses? You go to Microsoft 365 Admin Center and you can add them from there. Just know that if you go to the PowerApps website, so if you search for PowerApps and you go to the PowerApps website and you go to look for licenses, currently it only shows you the $20 per month, which is the per user. It doesn't really show you the other option, which is the $5 per month. If you want to get to that one, you need to go from the Office 365 Admin Center. And then finally, a couple of best practices about when you're working with PowerApps. Just like when you're working with Power BI, you want to limit the number of visualizations you put on a report screen. With PowerApps, you also want to limit the number of individual controls that you put on an application. So instead of using a bunch of cards, you want to use a gallery, for example. And then in general, you also want to limit the number of data connections that an application works with. You can benefit from caching. So with PowerApps, you can cache the data when it makes sense. So there's a function called clear collect, and you can use that when your application starts to cache the data so you're not constantly reading the data from your backend data source. Another easy one to remember is to republish your app regularly. So what happens is that Microsoft is constantly optimizing the PowerApps environment. So by you just republishing an application after a year, even if you haven't made any changes, you're going to get a performance boost. And then the delegation. So delegation is important. And what that means is that if you're working with a backend data source, such as SQL Server, for example, that's good at filtering data. So what you want to do is let the backend do the filtering, limit the data to what you need, and then only pull that into the application versus pull all the data and then filter it. Same logic applies on the Power BI side of things. So that's about the delegation, and then I'm going to skip over. I know we have just a few moments left. Real quick about the licenses on Power BI side. So on the Power BI side, as a reminder, we have 3 kinds of licenses, and these licenses, by the way, even with Microsoft Fabric, the license model for the Power BI side does not change. So you are either a free user, which means you have to be an office user. It doesn't mean a totally free. It's a business user, really. And then we have a pro user and a premium per user. Those 2 are the ones who can actually publish content to the workspaces. And so everybody needs licenses to publish. And then when it's time to consume, everybody can consume from their My Workspace, which is their personal playground. It's not best practice to share out of your personal playground. It's personal because it's meant to be for you. And then when it comes to other workspaces, the Pro and premium per user licenses can download from the premium and premium per user workspaces, the ones that have the diamond on them without having an extra license. Same with free users. So if you have free users, the best model is to go with the premium workspace because you pay for the capacity. Your pro and premium per users can publish to it, but your consumers don't need to have a license. Again, this becomes a matter of calculating the cost. If you are a small company, it may make more sense for you to have both your consumers and developers have a pro license. But once you're past a certain number of users, then a capacity may make more sense for you. And then finally, one last thing I want to mention is that in Power BI, you can embed a PowerApps. So licensing still needs to be covered, so it does not change anything about licensing required from the PowerApps side or Power BI side. The sharing, all of that stays. But there is a PowerApps visual that you can put on a Power BI report. And what it does is that then you can embed your Power App. And once you do that, then you can use your Power Apps to update the data. And then depending on the data storage mode that you choose for your Power BI, you can get the page to refresh and show the results instantly. Now, in order to do that, you have to start creating you have to start your application built from the Power BI side. So you put the visual on your screen and then you click on create the app and it will tie it in. So the order of operation is very important of how you do this. You have to also initiate this from the Power BI service, not from the desktop. Once you follow these steps, then it's super easy for you to use an application in Power BI so that you update the data and it will automatically refresh your page for you. Here I have some references for you. I also uploaded the slides to my blog. I posted the link to it earlier today. So that's all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed this, and please let me know if you have any questions or if you would like to connect. I would love to connect with you on LinkedIn or on Twitter. Thank you so much.